like you're trying to do work. Basically, what's called going to the marketplace. That's what people usually do. When they need to get to the marketplace, they use a stick to guide the animal through the streets. But the first Havamin of the Gemora is because that stick that you want to use is just a stick. And normally a stick has the din of muksa. So the Gemora originally thinks that's the maklokus. Because of the muksa element, which is actually, we don't have time to go into the whole thing, but the previous line of the Mishnah also was talking about the question of muksa, using wood or not, because it has a din of muksa. So if that's the maklokus, what would the maklokus be? The Tanakama says you can't do it because the stick is muksa. The Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon says you can do it because... That's right, that's what the Gemara thinks to say. And that would make sense partially why Shabbatai. Why would that make partial sense?
Because his father didn't hold it.
Because that's what his father holds, right? And we obviously would love to say his son holds like his father, although most sons don't hold like their father. But it turns out this question of whether the son holds like the father in this particular respect is a big controversy, whether you can really prove it or not. And therefore, the Gemora ends up thinking, maybe we have a proof from here, because what else are they arguing about? They're probably arguing about, as you said, whether there is muksa or not. And if the son is saying you can use the stick because there's no problem with muksa in general, he's holding like his father is saying there's no problem with muksa. What does it mean there's no problem with muksa? If something's useless, obviously you can't move it. He holds with that muksa. But if something has a use, then you can use it. The very fact that it was usher at the beginning of Yom Tov doesn't make a difference. As long as it has a usage to you now, go ahead, Gazai Gazunt, use it. Okay. So that would be the shita that you would hold. There's no problem with muksa because it has a usage for you now. I want to guide the animal, and I'm allowed to do it. So that's what the Gemara thinks to say. So where we really are, we sort of progressed, we did the whole Gemara underneath where you are, all the way up till, as we said, Lamed Gimel, which is the next stop. And we went all the way up to the Mishnah, actually. I think, or no, we were up to we were up to the 2 dots, I think. Yeah. And there the Gemara starts out by saying that we thought, basically we're thinking that this would be a good proof that the son holds like the father, right? So we're really on the next page, so that's really where we are. Okay.
Next page, 2 dots.
So Rabbi Shimon doesn't allow it.
Doesn't allow what?
He says asur to draw
He
the animal.
he doesn't say asur. He doesn't say asur. He is not the one who says asur. The Rabbanim say so. We would. The truth is, if we don't know any differently, we would assume he's part of the Rabbanim.
He agrees though with the Rabbanim.
Let's put it this way. We have no proof either way, so we can just assume.
Doesn't it say more there? He agrees some ways.
If it says it, I don't know if it's on record or we're just supposing. Just 1 second. The next page.
Read it somewhere.
No, the Gemara says Afila Rabbi Shimon Moda, but it's not that we have a brisa that says it. It's that we're saying it. We're saying we believe that even the famous Rabbi Shimon who doesn't hold the muksa could hold like the Rabbanan here.
You say you don't do it.
Why? Because it's not muksa
not
dependent.
muksa,
It's some other issue, Marsain issue.
Right.
That there's no direct proof either way. All you could say is that his name isn't singled out. So let's say Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon clearly argues, but if it doesn't say that Rabbi Shimon argues, so maybe he's part of the Rabbanan.
So his son allows, yeah.
The son allows it. Now, if he was holding like his son, perhaps it should have used his name, not just his son's name.
So
if it doesn't bring out his son, he's probably with the group of the Rabbanan who say it's Asur.
So what is the reason the son allows this?
In the end,
Yeah.
according to the end, because he believes that this doesn't look like you're trying to bring the cow to marketplace, I suppose. Not every. That's the problem with Marasayan. You're doing something that could look bad, but not everybody has to see it as bad.
So Rashi speaks.
Let's say you're hanging up wet laundry on Shabbos, okay?
Right.
Everybody's going to assume that you washing your clothing on Shabbos, the great Marinus Jacobson.
By the way, Marinus is not such a good name, you know that.
Oh,
Marinos. Because it means pig. And Marinos, it means pig.
if I'm speaking Afrikaners, or if I'm speaking...
This is what they called the Jews who undertook to become Christians during the Spanish Inquisition. They called them Marinos.
So then it's Spanish.
Which means pigs.
So it's Spanish.
Yeah, it's for Spanish.
Since I'm not speaking Spanish, I assume you know that
Not
Marinus...
Greek.
It's a good thing.
It's all Greek to me.
If you want to say anything, you could say Marinus means you have to travel in the ship to get to your house, because you have to be Marinus. You have to be a mariner to get to your house. Okay, which makes sense. If you're living in Australia, how else are we going to get to your house unless we take a ship? That's what Marinus.
Move to the old city where it's easy to get to.
No, after 6 o'clock, it's impossible to get to take a boat to get there, or a helicopter.
That's right. You got more chance of getting there, probably.
All right. In the meantime, because we assume that they're arguing about muksa, so therefore the Gemora says lema. You see the line that says lema?
So I'm still sorry to keep on harping on this. We know that Rabbi Shimon says it's not allowed, but not.
No, we don't know that. We don't know that. He didn't say anything explicitly on that subject.
But he agrees with the rabbis.
You're saying it because the Gemora says it,
Yes.
Moda. But that's the Gemora saying that even Rabbi Shimon could be Moda because it has nothing to do with Muksa.
Right.
Not that we know he's Moda.
Oh, so it's even he could be Modeh,
Yeah.
but not that he is Modeh.
It's like saying, in essence, he could be Moda. There's no reason why he can't agree with the Rabban here.
Right.
Don't assume he's
Oh,
holding
I
a certain
see.
position.
So maybe,
Not because we have scriptural evidence to that effect.
So maybe he.
I was saying to you before that perhaps, though, you could argue that the assumption was that he agrees with the Rabbanan. Why? Because if he really disagreed with the Rabbanan, either he should have been together with his son arguing, should say Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon are Matir. Or maybe just Rabbi Shimon Matir. If he really is Matir, it should have put his name in, put the father's name in, don't just put the son's name in. If it left his name out of that part of the Mishnah, of the agreement, of being Matir, then most likely he's part of the Rabban who says it's also.
And we know that the son doesn't agree with the father.
In which issue? Muksa?
Yeah.
No, I think that's the... I think personally it's a question that comes up in a number of Gemoras. Therefore, our Gemora would love to be able to bring a proof from here. That's why the lame is like saying, shall we say that? And therefore we can have a good proof. Very, very often the Gemora is trying to look for a proof in a particular Gemora to some question that's elsewhere.
Yeah.
So let's say there is a question in another Gemora somewhere. Do you think Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon holds like his father regarding Muksa or not? Maybe some argue this way, some argue that way. So the Gemara is here saying, so therefore can we say that we have a good proof from our Mishnah to that controversy, and we can prove that he holds like his father? Then the Gemara says, no, you can't necessarily prove it because it's not a Muksa issue here, it's a Marasayan
So
issue.
nowhere do we know what Rabbi Eliezer holds by.
In regarding Muksa.
Nowhere.
And I can't say unequivocally because I don't remember all of Shas on like the back of my hand. But all I'm saying is that logically, if our Gemara is suggesting to bring a proof from here
Yeah.
that suggests that elsewhere we're not clear on that subject, and that it's an issue, so therefore it would be a big find.
And how do we know it's bringing you a proof from here?
Because why should we say lema? Let's say he holds like his father. What do you mean, let's say? What do we care about that? We're learning Beitsa, we're learning about a stick and an animal. What are you bringing up the whole other issue for? It sounds like we have an axe to grind.
Where are we starting from?
I was trying to start from lema.
It's kind of topic.
It's convoluted.
Well, again, we can make any assumption we want and see if it works. Let's assume that elsewhere they prove that he doesn't hold like his father. Then this would be like a bigger fight. let's say from here we actually have proof against what we said elsewhere, that really we have proof that he does hold like his father. So that would be taking something and saying, I have the proof of the opposite. Okay? Or we could say that elsewhere there's a controversy. Some people say he does hold like his father, some people say he doesn't hold like his father. It's not clear. And our Gemora would be saying, okay, but you know what? Let's say that we can bring a proof from here to that famous controversy that's elsewhere, assuming there is another Gemora somewhere that discusses this issue. But let's go out on a limb. Let's say there's no other Gemora that ever discusses it. It's hard to imagine with such an important topic whether the son holds like the father in this issue. I mean, well, one would think that it would come up. But let's say it had never come up elsewhere. Now the Gemara is just saying, oh, but isn't that an interesting question? Does he hold like his father? Let's say from here we could bring a proof that he holds like his father. So even if it was never discussed elsewhere, our Gemara would still be interested in bringing a proof. Because why not? Wouldn't it be nice to say that Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon holds like his father on the Muksa issue? Not just because it would be nice to say that for once the son agrees with his father. Which is very unusual. But also because the more people that we know hold a certain shita, the more we're likely to paskin like that shita.
So we only know that Rabbi Shimon, up to this point, that only Rabbi Shimon holds by.
I can't be sure if there's no one else who's on his side, but maybe I'm just thinking of the possibilities. There's one possibility that elsewhere it's a controversy, and we're trying to say, oh, let's bring a proof from here to try to decide the controversy elsewhere. Or it could be the opposite, and maybe elsewhere there are people who assume that he doesn't hold like his father. Then we're like actually fighting with them, and we're saying, you might say that over there, but we're thinking over here we have good proof the opposite. Or it could be it's a completely parva issue. Maybe no one ever discussed it elsewhere. We don't really have a proof either way, but nonetheless, it's a good opportunity. If we have a Mishnah that seems to go like his father on the Muksa issue, wouldn't that be nice if we could bring, like let's say we could score and bring a good proof from here that his son holds like the father? So the truth is, it would be nice if somebody did speak on this issue. I don't know. Maybe Tosus does. Right? There's a number of things that we haven't, looked into here, but I'm just wondering, it's possible that somebody actually discusses this issue. When we're saying, let's say, which kind of like begs the question, well, what do we normally say? That you're saying, let's say this. Either we're saying normally we say the opposite, and here the way to challenge you. No, let's say this. Or maybe elsewhere it's a controversy, and we just would be love to bring a proof to one side of the controversy.
It's not likely that the Gemora would say, let's say, if it was very clear elsewhere that he didn't agree with it. That
Not
seems
necessarily.
To be a very
See, that's the
strong
point. That's the point. The Gemora is not afraid to raise an issue. Like at Charles Orpha.
Was hier syntax with
Sorry, still like camera?
Just a second. Somebody sent you? Who's your father? More? Oh. Tell your father you're on the video now.
Well,
Thank you very much.
You might get in trouble with the video.
Interesting.
All I'm saying is I could see either scenario. My inclination is to read this Gemora in the way in which I presented it. I think in the beginning that it is a controversy elsewhere, and let's say wouldn't it be nice if we could bring a proof from here and try to decide that issue which was a cloudy issue elsewhere. But the truth is, the fact that we're arguing about this point, and it is a point worthy of discussion. I imagine somebody discusses it. I'll try to look it up, Lena, or later. Maybe someone will force him to read that into the Gemora. This question of what does he hold elsewhere. Maybe there's a clear Gemora elsewhere. Maybe not speculation. I don't know. Anyways, are you sufficiently confused? Not yet?
no.
We'll try harder.
This is the middle of an argument.
We'll try harder, Jack.
We'll have to try harder.
So I don't know how many they think they're arguing about Muktzah.
We thought they're arguing about Muktzah, and that was logical. Why was that logical? Not just because it'd be nice the son was holding like the father, but also the previous line in the Mishnah about the bikas. We talked about taking like a chip of wood, using wood for different things, and we said an interesting thing, which we don't usually say, that wood on Yom Tov, of course, most people say it's not muksa because you can use it for firewood, right? And you need to cook. In the old days, they didn't have gas. So what did they use? They used fuel, like wood. Wood was the easiest fuel. So normally, if you ask someone, is wood muksa on Yom Tov, we'll say no. Wood is firewood. It's not muksa. But when the Gemora says you can't use pieces of wood for, let's say, resting a pot on, or stopping, like a door stopper or something like that. So Rashi says an interesting thing, but it's actually the Gemora says it afterwards in a Beitsa, that the reason is because it's a funny kind of thing. Wood on Yom Tov, at least according to this Manda Omer, is a kind of quasi-muksa, but you don't really normally have those things. Usually something's either muksa or it's not muksa. Here it's like the Rabbanan decided to give you a use for it, because of course people have to cook, but you can't use it for anything else. That's what the Gemora seems to be saying here. Not that you can't use wooden things. If it's an implement, then it's not muksa, but just a regular piece of wood that should be muksa because it's just wood, then we say it's not in the one respect because you can use it for firewood, but it is in all other respects that you can't use it for anything else.
So this brings us to the next part.
So since the previous line was basically discussing that issue of muksa in a roundabout way, we just figured that the next very last line of the Mishnah says you can't use a stick to guide the animals, following in the footsteps of that same idea.
Can I put the window? The window.
Please. Would anybody mind if I turn this on? Keep it at the lowest, or should I put it up a notch?
Try this first.
Try this first and see how we are.
We've been blessed with really nice weather. Yeah? We've been blessed with really nice weather here.
Yeah.
Considering it's midsummer.
We're going to Montreal. That's so nice. It's usually raining. Windy, raining. Serious wind.
Okay, so should we go through the Gemora on that little section, or should we just go on to that next part about, we started the next little part, which is a machlokas about a skewer, using wood as a skewer.
This is very good.
Hot off the press. Which would you like to do, gentlemen? After the two dots or before the two dots? After the two dots. Okay, are you in agreement, Truly?
Yes.
Okay, and Jack, you know what that means that we are? See the two dots there? Good further down, good further down. Israel is the first word in the line. Looks like Chazara. Yeah. So Israel, Rashi says, means like a skewer, but not a metal one, like one made out of, I think they call it in English a spit. A wooden. So we just finished saying, in a number of ways, that wood is muksa. Right? You're not really allowed to use wood.
Let's use it for burning.
Let's use it for burning. And there's one other thing that Rashi alludes to, which is that if you did something to make it into a kli on Erev Yom Tov, of course, which in this case all you'd really have to do is maybe carve the end down to be a pointy end. But chizra is more like a thorn bush, so it's almost like you're taking a branch that has thorns at the end that can make it pointy all by itself. So you didn't do anything to make it pointy, but you want to use it as a natural stick for your skewer. So then we have a machlokas if you're allowed. If we look at it like a regular piece of wood, and we said just now that wood is only for burning, for using as fuel in a fire? Or do we say, no, since it has this particular usage, you can use this as well? So based on what we said before, that wood on Yom Tov is what?
Is also
Is basically muktzah.
muktzah.
Just the Rabbanan said it's not muktzah for burning, for creating a fire, for feeding a fire. So now that they're taking the skewer and they're going to push it into an animal and roast it in the fire. It's really for roasting in a fire. So do you say this is part of what the Rabbanan allowed you to use wood for, to create a fire? It's part of the fire, so to speak? Or not? That seems to be the part of the question here. Okay, so let's go on. Chizra, this pointy piece of wood that's naturally pointy. Shari. Okay, period. Right? It's very similar, the statements. This one forbids and this one permits. So that's all you really want to say is something that's parallel wording. You don't want to go beyond the word shari, because shari means permitted. So once you're saying Rav Nachman, the end of his sentence is Nachman Aser, so you want to go on and say Rav Sheshes was shari, was matir. You get it? So now we have a question about a new question. It's really the third question we've had if you consider the Mishnah to be two cases of using wood. One where I want to rest the pot on top of it, and the other where I want to guide the animal with it. And we said it's not so simple. And here we have a third case. You want to use it for a skewer for your animal, for roasting your whatever animal you used to roast. Goat, sheep, whatever.
Bavaz.
Huh?
Bavaz.
A barbaz. That's what he said he's using it for? We had it before. We had it before.
Did he say tea? What did he say? Cook for me a bavaz?
And that's what he said to his wife, right?
Yeah.
It was a question about cleaning out the oven to make sure it doesn't burn too much.
What's the amber vase? That's
Is that goose?
a goose.
Gosling.
Gosling.
So there it was also taking a skewer, inserting it into the animal, and then holding it over the fire. Not always as we do, horizontally. They used to sometimes have ovens that had holes vertically, and they would insert it from up, hanging into the oven. But anyhow, so that it was very important, certain types of cooking, you needed a skewer. So as Rashi says, if Erev Yom Tov you actually sharpened up that stick and did some kind of an act to make it into a kli, that could have been okay. But since you didn't ever do that, it remains a regular stick, a regular piece of wood, and therefore it should go with the regular rule, which is what? What's the rule with wood on Yom Tov?
It's muktzah.
Except
For burning.
for burning. So it has a specific usage, but no other usage, right? Only for cooking, etc., for creating a fire. So this would seem, according to Reb Nachman, to go into the category of not being used as a fire, right? Not used as kindling, yeah, not used as fuel. So what does the Gemora say? You want to carry on, Jack? After Reb Nachman Shari?
Shari. Ritva. Kuli Alma. Lo Pligi.
Retiva.
Ritva.
What does that mean? You know what in modern Hebrew ratuv means?
Sauce.
Wet. Right, moist, wet.
Ritva is a sauce.
So we're talking about a skewer, right, made out of a piece of wood. So it turns out that if it's
Wet.
wet, it's a moist stick, right? Like a green stick or whatever you used to call it, right? The kind you don't like to use in fire. Then everybody agrees it's what?
Sauce.
It's usher. Why? Why do you think? Without looking in Rashi.
course, then it's really muktzah.
Why?
Because it doesn't burn.
So therefore,
You cannot use it.
the Rabbanan never mattered it.
Yeah.
At least one that could be used for a fire, the Rabbanan have mattered it for a fire.
Right.
And then you can argue, is this called using it for a fire or not? But one that's not even possible to use as a fire, or not normal to use as a fire, as a piece of fuel for the fire. So the Rabbanan never mattered it, so there's nothing to talk about. It's just a regular piece of wood that everybody knows is muktzah. Okay. So you see a little bit the direction the Gemora is going in. That maybe if it's a kind of wood that is used for fuel, it's a drier piece of wood, then maybe once the Rabbanan said it's mutter for using for a fire, this is also part of using it for a fire. Dude. Us, right?
The whole world.
Literally, they don't argue,
that it's,
but it means they all agree, right? If
they all agree.
we're talking like a normal red-blooded Canadian, everybody agrees, right?
Right.
Nobody argues, blah, blah, no. Everybody agrees. That's how we say it in English. Everybody agrees that what?
That it's aser.
That it's us. Now, we just discussed it. Did you catch what we were saying? Why everyone would agree that it's us? Did that make sense? We just said a few ideas to explain that. Did you catch that?
Oh yeah,
See, we're cheating because we had the whole sugya yesterday and the day before to back us up.
I'm using it as a fuel.
Again, the Rabbanan made a rule, right? Essentially, wood is muktzah. But ones that are used for fire, the Rabbanan let you use it for a fire, but not for anything else.
Okay.
So it's like a selective heter the Rabbanan gave to wood.
Yeah, was that for fuel or for just for support for the skewer? Just
No,
like
no.
the stick.
But we're talking before about regular wood. You want to use wood for something on Yom Tov? Ask yourself a question. Am I about to put it in a fire and use it as fuel? Then it's mutter.
Yeah.
But if not, then it's still muktzah.
Okay.
It's basically muktzah, except the Rabbanan said, but if you're going to use it for a fire, we let you do it. We let you use it. Okay? So now we said if it's moist, you know why it's usser? Because the whole idea is that maybe the Rabbanan would say you can use it for fire, you can use it for a skewer. Once they let you use it for a fire, you can use it, but this is moist. They'll never let you use this for a fire. Because no one does. No one uses moist wood for fires.
Okay.
So it has to start out with why did the Rabbanan let you use this? If it's because it's for fire, then it has to be a piece of firewood.
Fuel.
Then, right. Then you can discuss, oh, maybe I can do something else with it. Once I'm using it for the fire, I can use it for other things. Maybe I can even use it for a skewer. But if I can't even use it for a fire, it doesn't get off the ground. It just doesn't fly.
Yeah.
Right? Not even to the Ukraine.
We went to a chicken farm. Stop.
Yeah.
So, a gang of about 30, 40 chickens come running out of the barn.
So you told those people, and in Israel we're learning Seches Beitsa. I'd like to see how these hens lay their eggs, so I can tell my Rebbe.
That's right.
So what'd you learn? No.
Don't start up with a chicken.
Well, you know what they say. If you don't want to do something because you're afraid, you're a chicken. So it doesn't make sense to be afraid of a chicken. Chicken are the example of someone who's afraid.
Right. We don't seem to be so afraid of us. We came in there.
And you're afraid of the Ukrainians who want their chicken.
30 wild chickens running at you.
Uh-huh. You know, one of the whiskeys that's sought after is wild turkey. They don't call it wild chicken. Compared to however wild they are, they're not as wild as a wild turkey. All right.
Just the origin for all these names.
Yeah. Some drunk going in the hills of Kentucky. Now, let's call it this, you know. Okay.
We drank a lot and saw wild turkeys running around.
Did you see that turkey? No. Did you see that turkey? Alright. Whose phone is ringing? Mine. Sorry. Long arm of the law. My wife is sending me a message from America. Okay, so everybody agrees that what? If the stick is
Green and moist.
then it is for sure muksa, because the Rabbanan never gave you a heter on this at all. The only heter they would ever give you is to use it for a fire. This can't be used for a fire. But Kipligi, when do they really argue then? Yaveshta.
That's dry.
That's right, a drier piece of wood. A regular piece of wood is good firewood. Then we have a machlokas Rav Nachman Rav Sheshes. How do you look at it? Rav Nachman says it's aser. You know why he says it's aser? Because this is not called using it for the fire. You're using it to hold something in the fire, but that's not the same as using it for a fire. Whereas Rav Sheshes says what? What does Rav Sheshes say?
I'm trying to find it. Okay, now so Rav Sheshes Sari.
Sharp.
Shari. He allows it.
He allows it. And why do you think he allows it? Let's see Rashi. Anyone reading Rashi's? You can read Rashi.
Chazvarat.
Huh?
Which Rashi?
What's your option?
Chazvarat.
Chizra.
Chizra.
What's the next Rashi?
Rabbi Nachman Asa. Yalta.
You want to get to Rav Sheshes, which saying it's mutter. You have Rav Sheshes saying it's mutter in Rashi?
Nope.
Okay, so then what's the next Rashi after Rav Nachman Asa?
Tiva.
Okay, so that's still in the part where we said everyone's going to aser if it's Rativa. But the next Rashi.
No, nothing else after that.
Okay, so let's discuss why is it aser b'Rativa. Let's read that Rashi.
The Tiva. It's similar to wet, it's most them, it's also. I know more than the Torah. It's not fitting to be to move it, to use it. Torah. Saka, even for burning, everybody agrees it's not. Nobody argues that it's awesome. We agree, even for
Where is it?
start again.
No, just show me those spaces, other places. Or a T1. Yeah, or a T1.
Did we finish the Rashis?
Tiva, we start again. She'ena roy le'tal toloi. It's not fitting to be used to move it. The telton is to drop it. Afilu la'asaka ukule amr le'bibi da'asa. Even if we use it for burning, everybody agrees and nobody argues to say that it's asa. Agree that it's
So this is like an extra halacha we're learning over here. The whole thing about using wood for firewood that we say normally is mutter on Yom Tov, but that's only if it's really dry wood. Any wood that's a little bit moist, I don't know how moist it has to be to go into this category. Rashi's saying it's as usher as anything else. The Rabbanan never made it mutter. So if you even said, look, that's the only wood I have. It rained yesterday. The wood is all wet. What can I do? Sounds like it might be muksa. I'm not sure. You might have to find some other kind of fuel. Okay, so let's go on in the Gemora then. Who's reading the Gemora?
It was. Rativa Asur, okay. Urash Rava.
Yavesh. Yaveshta. Like Rativta is moist, Yaveshta is the dry.
So Kuli Alma Lo Pligi.
With Rativa,
The Shari.
no. Is there an Ikadamri here?
No, that's further down.
So where's he reading from?
It's reading the Veshta.
Doesn't say Kuli Alma there, does it? Right, so I think
I'm up here.
you've entered a new realm there. You don't want to be reading that far down. We're in the first version, which is further up. Right after the two dots. Chizra is like the title. If you have that kind of a stick that's pointy that could be used as a skewer, then you have the following maklokes. That Nachman says what? It's also.
Rav Shesha
Shesha says what?
permitted.
It's permitted. Now the Gemora clarifies what is their exact argument. Keep going.
Tiva Kuli Alma Lo Pligi. If it's wet, everyone agrees
That what?
that it's Asur.
Good.
Ki Pligi Leveshta. The argument when it's dry.
Right.
Manda Asur.
Which means Manda Omer.
The man who says.
Right. The man who says that's either of Nachman or of Sheshes. You try to figure out who we're talking about. Who do you think is talking about? Manda Omer what?
Amar Lecha.
What's Manda Omer?
The person who said.
Yes, so you have to say what he says.
What he
What does it say after Manda Omer?
Amar Lecha. Lord.
I'm sorry, we're not communicating. When it says Manda Omer, no, it doesn't say Manda Omer, it says Manda Asar. No, that's not Omer, that's Asar, it's a Samit.
Okay, Manda Asur, okay.
So the man that says it's Asar, and you know who that is, who is that? Do you remember who's the one who said it's Asar? Chizra, we just read that, right? Chizra, Rav Nachman's the one who says Asar. Here we mean, when it said Manda Asar, I mean Rav Nachman who says it's Asar. What would he say about the wet one? I'm sorry, the dry one. Manda Omer, Amanda Asar, sorry.
Manda Asur, Amar Lecha.
Right, which means what?
He said to you.
In other words, he would say to you.
He would say
The Gemora usually says that expression when he's not here to answer for himself, but we believe he would say the
He
following.
would say that. Lo natnu eitzim ela la haska
Hasaka.
Osaka.
He would say, why do I say it's usher to use this as a spit? Because you just read, right? Lo nasnu eitzim,
Didn't give trees.
meaning the Chazal didn't say you're allowed to use wood. Trees here means wood. The word eitz can mean tree or wood. Here we mean wood.
Ela la haska.
Ella, only, they're only saying you could use wood on Yom Tov hasaka for hasaka. Do you remember what hasaka is? In modern Hebrew, when there's a one heater for the whole building, a furnace, that's called the hasaka, the heating. Here we mean taking trees or wood and burning it in a fire to heat yourself up or to heat the food up. That's called hasaka. Basically, fuel for the fire. So Rav Nachman says, you know why I don't let you use this as a skewer? Because what's the only usage you can use wood for on Yom Tov?
Well, the only usage here allowed is for burning.
Right. That's what he's saying. So Rav Nachman's position is clear to you? Jack?
Yeah, he uses it only for burning, right?
That's why he won't let use it for what?
For anything else.
As a skewer. He wanted to use this one as a skewer.
Okay.
But Rav Sheshes, who says you are allowed to use it as a skewer, what's he going to say?
That's it.
He does permit it. Why does he permit it?
Amar Lacha, Achazi Esek Gadol.
He would say what?
It looks like Esek
Wait, where do you think it looks like? Which word do you...
Haska.
Hasaka means burning.
Man the Shari,
What does that mean, Mandashari?
man who permits it.
Who is, in this case, okay, so Mandashari means Rav Sheshes. He would tell you, why am I letting you use this piece of wood for a skewer? Because what? Amar Lach, behold, it is Chazi Lahasake. It is,
fitting, or
Right.
looks like.
no, here it means fitting. It's
Fitting.
fitting for a purpose, has a purpose,
I'll say.
for Hasaka.
I'll say.
And what kind of Hasaka really normally?
Asak Gadol. Behilchata.
So what's the end of the sentence then? Chazi Lahasaka means,
It's fitting for burning.
right, because why is it fitting for burning? Because it's dry.
Hilchata Rivashta, that's what it means.
Just a second.
I think you're reading a bit further down, actually.
Who's reading further down?
Okay.
Me?
No, it does say Hilchasa, right
No,
after.
no. Mandashari Amalach Ma Letzilot.
Oh, right, there it is.
Okay.
You're right, I was
Higher up.
further down. Yeah, you went to the Ika Damri, right. You slipped into the Ika Damri by mistake again.
Okay.
You see the words Ika Damri? First two words in the line, Ika Damri? Farther down, farther down.
Here I see.
You saw it.
Yeah.
That means it's a new version. So we're now in the first version. So if you start to read beyond this, we're going to be confusing the two versions, which,
Okay.
you know, if you want to make a third version out of the mixture of the first two versions, it's all interesting, but you're not aware. Right? We're trying to figure out what's the first version.
We're talking about the Ikadam here. Rivashta.
Yeah, now we're not going to start that yet. Right? We want to first finish the first version and understand that approach before we start the second version. Because we mix the two together, it will be confusing.
Alright.
So let's just concentrate on the first one, which means don't read anything after the Ikata Amri and the Gemora right now.
Okay.
So Mandashari, right before the Ikata Amri says Mandashari,
Yeah. Mandashari. Man said, who says it's permitted.
in other words, Rav Sheshes. Why does he hold that?
Amar Lecha. Mali Itzlot.
Litzlot Bo.
Itzlot. Mali Itzlot Gechalto. Why is it roasted with Gechalim?
Okay, when you say Mali this and Mali that, it's like saying, what do I care if it's this and what do I care if it's that? It's all the same. That's Mali. Mali means what is there to me, meaning what do I care? What do I care if it's for this or for that? It's all the same. What's he saying? Mali.
It's not why? It makes no difference whether it's roasted with gechalim, with coals.
No, you read the second part first. You want to read the first part first. Mali lislos bo, mali lislos b'gachelta. What do I care if he's trying to roast with it, or to roast with gachelta? You know what a gachelis is? A burning coal, like a hot ember. Okay? So, you take this stick that Chazal said you're allowed to use for a fire. And everybody agrees if I put on a fire, let it develop to the point where it's embers, right, glowing coals, I can use it for cooking. Now, everybody agrees, right? Everyone agrees that's a mutter usage. So, what do I care if I'm gonna roast with it at that stage, which is a much later stage, or an earlier stage when I want to just insert it in the animal and use it to roast the animal? It seems like they're both parts of roasting. Right, the roasting process is, takes a number of minutes to do, right? First you have to take the animal, put a skewer in it, arrange it over the fire, right? And then eventually the fire turns into embers and then you really get things roasted properly. So I'm going to allow you to use wood for the roasting, which means all the way up until it turns into glowing embers. I can still use the wood. But you're telling me I can't use it for the part that's much earlier, when I'm just going to use it as a skewer? It's all the same. It's all part of the process of roasting. So what do I care if you use this stick for roasting at the beginning of the stage of roasting or the very end of the stage of roasting?
Okay.
That's what Rav Sheshes has an idea to say. That's why he's saying it's mutter to use this stick. He agrees with the general idea. The generally sticks are muksa for anything other than using in a fire. But this piece of wood that I'm trying to use for a skewer, he says, you're going to use it for roasting. Because they allowed you to take the stick and put it in the fire and use it as for roasting. So what do I care if you're using it for the beginning stage of roasting, which is how do you start roasting? You put a skewer in an animal and you put it on the fire. That's the beginning of roasting.
Or the end stage.
Or the end stage, which is when it turns into hot glowing embers and you finish the cooking. You finish the roasting. So since I can for sure use this wood for what I want to do in part of the roasting, why can't I use it for the other part, which is as equally as necessary for roasting? Making sure the animal has a proper skewer in it. That's Rav Shesh's new idea. That's how he feels that he could say it's permissible, even though he agrees with the general problem of using wood for anything other than a fire. But this isn't for anything other than a fire. He looks at it as part of the process of roasting. If I let you use the wood for roasting, then I should be allowed to use it for all parts of the roasting process, even this part. I think that's what he's saying. Okay, Ikeda Amri Shabbatai, which means
another version.
there are those that say another version. There are rabbis who remember another version. That usually means they're from a different base of midrash, right? Not from usually from the same base of midrash. They're unified in what they have learned.
No one's arguing about this dry one. Okay. The Shari.
That's what they agree on.
Yeah, that it's permissible.
Okay, so according to this version, that's where that we just saw in Rav Sheshes that. What do I care if you're using this wood for the beginning of the roasting process, i.e. using it as a skewer, or the end of the roasting process?
So they just turned it around. In the first version, they were arguing over the wet stick. No one argues over the wet stick, and here no one's arguing over the dry stick. Right?
Okay, but what I'm trying to point out is that at this point, we're saying in the second version that everybody agrees that you can use it.
Yeah.
It, right? Which we're saying, we know before was a question. But if everyone's agreeing you can use it now, it must be everyone's agreeing with whom? with the original view of Rav Sheshes,
Yeah.
which we just spent time figuring out that it means that you can use it because it's all part of the roasting process.
Right.
So it comes out according to the second version. Everybody agrees on that. Everybody agrees as long as it's part of the roasting process, you can use it.
So keep plugging. So what are they arguing about? The ratibata, about the wet stick, the moist stick.
Right.
Ma'anda solo the law chazi laska. So according to the man who says it's not suitable for burning, Ma'an the Sharei, Amalach, he would say to you, so for the man who permits it, he would say to you, Ah chazilaska, Vadol. Rahal, okay, Vadol. And he would say to you that the wet stick is suitable even to use in a very large fire.
Mm-hmm. Just 1 second. Okay, so that's a new idea that we never had before. This is a new approach to the wet stick. What do we say in the first version? If it's a wet stick, you can't use it according to everyone. Why?
Because it's muktzah. It's not going to. It's muktzah. It's wood not for burning.
In other words, when they said wood is permissible, they weren't talking about this wood. This wood remains usher.
Right.
It's about dry wood.
So dry wood in the first version, no one's arguing about.
They're arguing about it.
I mean, they're arguing about.
Okay, all I'm trying to point out is that now, if in the first version everyone said, look, if it's moist, nothing I'm talking about, the Rabbanan wouldn't let you use it.
Right.
Because what are you going to use it for? A fire? It's not fit for a fire. This version is saying, no, that itself is the question. Is this called fit for a fire? Right?
A large fire.
Right, so that's the answer. The answer is yes, it's fit for a fire, but not a regular fire. It has to be let's say a bonfire of sorts.
Well, not just across the road the other day, right?
I think even smaller, but yes. Big fire.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Gemora is saying that what? In the first version, we didn't think that a moist wood would ever be good for burning, therefore the Rabbanan never let you use it, so of course you can't use it. It's just like all other wood that's muktzah. But in the second version, we're saying no, that even the wet piece of wood has usage, what?
In a large fire.
In a very large fire, so then once they said you can use it in a fire, yes, albeit a large fire, again, then once they've said you could use it, I can use it for any part of the fire.
So how do they define large fire and small fire? That's the question.
I guess it would be more of a trial and error. Have you ever tried using wet firewood?
Isn't this kind of machira ochel nefesh? Even a wet stick?
Hmm?
Isn't a wet stick not machira ochel nefesh?
Why are you saying that?
Because you're using it to prepare food. You can use a knife, you can use a fork to prepare food.
But if I need to cook something, I need to be able to.
It doesn't burn. A fork doesn't burn. A knife doesn't burn.
Okay, but the only word usage could be to use it in a fire. You said wood has no other usage but to use it to a fire.
So
If I'm going to give this a usage, it has to be through the fact that it's good for a fire.
even the wet stick.
That's the question. Can you say that about a wet stick? Well, most people say, look, I have no usage for a wet stick.
So that's the question. Because that machira ochel nefesh.
Why are you trying to explain it as far as makshir and fish?
Because you're using it.
It's a question of muksa. Right now we're wondering, is it muksa? Right? We made a big statement. The Rabbanan looked at all wood, right? Let's say that's not neatly stacked and all of that other kind of thing. Wood that's just not for... And it doesn't really have any other purpose except for using the firewood. So they said, okay, then you can use it for fire, but not for anything else. For everything else, it's muksa. So on the one hand, I have this rule that wood is really muksa. Right? That's like basically what we've been saying. Wood is muksa. essentially. The only thing that could save it is the Rabbanan said, but if you're going to use it for firewood, then for that it's still permissible. Okay?
So, okay, I understand what the Gemora said.
There's no problem. The question is this object an object that people look at as muksa or not?
You're sitting in the
Two versions. I don't know what this object is.
you're sitting in the woods and it's raining, but you really want to eat something on your own. You pick up a stick and you roast meat with it. According to this one version, you can't use that.
Yes,
So,
that would
in
be
other
true.
words, you don't eat on your own, which is
Why? I mean, this particular time, since you didn't prepare your firewood, you're going to be up the creek without a paddle, so to speak.
Yeah, no, your firewood's prepared.
Which firewood?
Let's say you've got coals, hot coals or whatever, and you want a nice barbecue. But how do you
Remember, okay, well, what if you have a salad and it starts to rain and the salad gets ruined?
Yeah.
So what are you going to say? It's ruined. It's ruined. You know, things happen. Life happens. Things get ruined.
Life's not a box of chocolates.
No. Once it gets ruined, it's ruined.
What about the marshmallows?
You have to go to Jack's house. You have to get up and walk to Rehavia to go to Jack's house.
Get the marshmallows.
Maybe he'll let you eat by him. What are you trying to prove by that?
No, I'm just saying.
We're not forbidding everybody because most people have dry firewood. You were a bit of a shlomazel. You ate in the forest and you didn't accept Jack's invitation. You ended up eating in the forest. It rained on you. Now you're upset because your firewood is wet.
I think you practically today. If you're sitting in a forest, right, and how would you barbecue meat in the forest? You take a metal fork, you put it in the fire.
Okay. Okay.
That metal fork does not burn. It's not meant for burning.
Okay.
It's meant for holding the piece
Okay.
of meat. So here what you do.
It's also a kli, so I don't have a problem with muksa.
Yeah, so this is also a key.
What's a kli?
It's a piece of wood.
No, it's not. That's the point. It's not a kli. Rashi actually said, if you would have taken it at Erev Yom Tov, done something to be masak in it, then it would have been a kli before Yom Tov. You wouldn't have a problem with muksa. The problem is pieces of wood that are not a kli should be considered muksa.
Okay, that's good.
Like an implement.
It's not an implement. It's not an implement. That's the point. It's just the Rabbanan said, but if you can, will basically be matter you to use it for firewood, because I can't imagine, right, spending Yom Tov without hot food. You want people to be happy.
So that's a very important statement to Rashi's, right? He's making this a key.
Well, I think Rashi's putting his finger on something that maybe we would remember without Rashi, but thank God there's Rashi to remind us that the whole sugi of muksa, which Rashi already clued us in much earlier, that this is already the main point here, is this muksa or not muksa, right? All the way back in the Mishnah with Bikas, we got into this whole thing that really wood is muksa. Once you know we're talking about muksa, hopefully you'll remember that what is muksa dependent on? Something that has no usage. If it has no usage and you decide to make it mukhan, you're basically saying I'm designating it for usage. Okay, but basically the rule of muksa, something has no usage is muksa, something has a usage shouldn't be muksa. The problem is something in the middle where it's not objectively a utensil, but some people might still use it. Okay, so wood is somewhere in the middle. It has a usage for burning, but that's not a normal usage. It's still considered muksa. Rashi says, right? Gemora says, "Lo niknu eitzim elo hasaka." Basically, it's muksa. It's not a utensil. It's muksa. And that's what Rashi pointed out. If you would make it into a utensil beforehand, then it would be a utensil. Can't make a utensil on Yom Tov because you're not allowed to make a kli on Yom Tov. That we've already talked about extensively. You'd have to do it Erev Yom Tov. Because if you don't do it Erev Yom Tov, then that's what it is. Muksa means it's not a utensil, by definition. The Chiddush in Rashi is that you could do a small act to make it into a utensil on Erev Yom Tov. Then we wouldn't look at it as just a regular piece of wood anymore. We say, oh, it's a utensil, it's a skewer. Sometimes just a small little act will help, it's like sharpening a pencil. You make it into an object which can be used.
So you could argue back and forth, and this, and if you knew that Rashi tells you that this got to be sharpened before Yom Tov, right?
What would you argue?
I mean, I personally, I wouldn't, if I read this even in English, I wouldn't see a major problem here.
Well, you know what muksa is, right? You know,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
become clear to you. Muksa means not a utensil.
Right.
Okay. So if we're saying the wood is muksa, it's because it's not a utensil.
So you think that most people would know, you don't really need Rashi to explain.
Again, Rashi's incredible for reminding us of the issue. And he's putting his finger on it. That's Rashi's one of his great traits is that he puts his finger on one of the critical issues. I have a piece of wood here, but it's not a regular piece of wood because it's pointy. But still, if I didn't create that or refine it, then I didn't have anything to do with it. It can't be called a utensil. It's just something that happened to be naturally pointy. So my only heter to use it at this point is not because it's a real utensil. It's muksa. Muksa means it's not a utensil.
Unless you
The only heter would be that the Rabbanan said I'm allowed to use it for firewood. So now can I get it in the front door of that heter? This is firewood. Or no, this isn't firewood. You're trying to use it as a skewer.
Right.
Then it has to somehow get into either the front door or the back door. Can you somehow get this into the front door or the back door of this heter? I want to use it as firewood. Can you call this firewood? No, I'm trying to use it as a skewer. It's not really firewood. Oh, no, you can call this because I'm using it to roast my lamb. So I'm going to call it firewood because I'm using it to roast. That's the first version that Rav Sheshis argues. The second version, everyone agrees to that. Everyone agrees that it's part of the fire burning process. The question is if it's moist, it's a borderline thing. Even in the area of burning it as firewood, but we have firewood and we have non-firewood. Turns out if there's something that's not even firewood, you can't even say it's mutter for fire.
But the large firewood.
So then we have this question. Most people don't create such a big fire. So can I say it's really the Rabbanan let me use this as firewood? I don't have a big fire. I have a small fire. Somewhere down the block they could have a big fire and, unlock the Omer across the street. Does that mean that I'm holding a piece of firewood in my hand? Because some people who have a huge fire would be able to use it? It's a bit of a different issue now. Can I call this firewood? Well, for most people this is not firewood. It's a moist piece of wood. But there are some people who could use this as firewood, so can we say it got in the door, the back door of the heter of being used as firewood? That's the question. Which is actually a question we've raised a number of times if you think about it in the sect. How many people have to use something to be able to call it a usage, as it were?
It's a kimta, isn't it, really?
No, it's a question. We have two different categories of wood, wet and dry. So,
But, I mean,
according to one version, it's clear. Wet wood is not firewood, according to everybody.
Yeah.
Dry is, but maybe this is not, I'm not using it as firewood. I'm trying to use it as a skewer. Can I get it in the back door of the heter of firewood, using it as a skewer? That's the first version. The second version says, no, even wet firewood could still be called firewood. That's the second version, it's Chiddush.
First version, wet firewood is not firewood at all. Question, can you
Wet
get
firewood is not firewood at all, that's why nobody will let you use it at all.
Second version was that the wet wood is considered firewood.
That's a question if you can call it firewood.
People call it
Can you
firewood.
rely on the few people who do use it in order to say it's mutter?
You have to leave in 5 minutes.